Hey, welcome back. We got him on the line. This is a book. We talked about it earlier during the day. This isn't just one book. This is a whole world. This is multiple books. This is the world that is the beautiful mind that is Steve Cavanagh. So we're kicking things off today with somebody who, by the way, Jim, he knows how to hijack your entire day, or at least 4 hours of it. Best-selling thriller author Steve Cavanagh. He's the mastermind between the internationally adored Eddie Flynn series, his newest audio thriller, The Cross, which just came out, or comes out today. Is today the 18th? Yeah, that's today.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it throws Eddie Flynn, who's an ex-con artist turned defense attorney. Yes, maybe one and the same. You be the judge. Turns him into a 24-hour this sprint across New York City, all barreling toward one explosive cross-examination. So, Jim, if you love morally complex heroes, and I know that you do, and legal chaos and, stories that keep you from doing anything productive, this is your guy. Steve himself is a former lawyer turned award-winning novelist from Belfast. He writes courtroom tension and that kind of with that kind of accuracy and mischief, I guess, is the balance that you can only get from someone who has actually been a part of it and lived it. So we're going to dive into the chaos of it all. The man we have on the line, can't wait to talk to you and cross-examine you by perhaps Steve Cavanagh. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Oh, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Got a great accent. That's all I need from you. We don't even need to talk.
I'll always love hearing my people. I have to tell you, Eddie Flynn is a fantastic character because he is a man, much like the man he is defending in this book, who has spent a life walking on the wrong side and now doing his best to apply the tactics and abilities he's learned over there onto the side of right. And this is kind of a change of pace while staying in the same world. You really make the clock a gigantic enemy in this thing without giving away the entire game. Can you kind of tell our friends out there listening on the road why this what the premise of this 4.5 hours of audio listening is?
Of course, yes, I'd be delighted. Well, The Cross is about Eddie, who's representing the widow of a man who has been murdered by the police in New York City. And he's bringing a civil claim, but he quickly realizes that there is a whole corrupt police force behind this. And a small section of them are threatening Eddie and everyone else if he proceeds with this case. So it's a question of whether he's brave enough to stand up for what is right. And if he does, what are the consequences?
The Morgue Squad. The Morgue Squad. And I have to tell you, that plays a large part in this too. And there really is, guys, if you are fans of a lot of that great cinema of the 70s, if you are a fan of a lot of that kind of morally compromised fiction that kind of, percolated up during that time period, this is a world for you. And I was kind of curious to ask you that question as well. And then Lindsay's got some stuff for you because we're both very excited to have you here if you can't tell. Are there films or gumshoes or novelists right now that you can actually feel them percolating in your words and in your veins as you create these tales?
Kind of, I loved a lot of those 70s movies as well, like The French Connection, Popeye Doyle, and, all of that, Serpico, The Godfather. So I grew up watching a lot of those movies. In terms of influences writing, Lee Child is a big influence on me as well. So, hopefully everything is, and John Grisham, of course. So hopefully everything is a little bit of a mishmash of all of that thrown together, and hopefully something good comes out of it.
Well, the mishmash and all thrown together only comes because of the world that you lived prior to this in order to write it, of course. And so, you built this entire fictional world around a defense attorney who used to be a con artist. So you're a former lawyer. I'm curious to you, Steve, what's one, and by the way, both Jim and I are children of attorneys.
And I'm a former investigator, so.
Yeah, so we love the world. But, I'm curious what's one thing that, because you're an attorney and writer, so what's one thing that lawyers, in your opinion, get wrong when they write, and what's something wrong that writers get wrong when they try to write about law when they haven't actually been an attorney themselves? You kind of are able to balance both of those worlds.
Oh, thank you very much. I think lawyers want to get the procedures right, and they're worried about that. And I think some writers make the same mistake. If they're not lawyers, they want to make sure they get all the legal procedures right. And how I manage to succeed, if I succeed at all, is I keep as much procedure out of it as possible. I'm interested in suspense and the psychological drama of the courtroom. For me, that's where the juice is. So I go straight for the drama.
So does Jimmy.
Yeah.
Perfect. All the time.
Which is really great too, because my dad, who's made a couple of passes at writing a book, he actually finally admitted to himself. He said, "I just can't get out of my head." He said, "I just can't bring myself to not follow the procedure in doing this." And he said, "I get myself bogged down in explanations and details and all this kind of stuff." But there is a game too that you have to play in this kind of writing, where you are kind of moving through procedure, but at the same time, you don't want to create an environment where even the most casual reader goes, "Wait a minute, why isn't somebody objecting? Why isn't somebody asking for the exception? What what is the purpose of the overruling?" You have to get. It's almost like you have to figure out where to put it selectively to make sure that people understand that you understand, while saying the point here is the story, not making sure we get the law case cited properly at the bottom of the page in a footnote, right?
Of course. I mean, it's fiction, so the number one thing I want to do is entertain. Now, I will have some details in there as long as they're interesting. And obviously, I try to keep the story as real as possible. But we all know even when you pick up a police novel, cops don't solve murders, chasing, around bad guys in a high-speed chase. Most murders are solved at their desk or in a lab, so there is a willing suspension of disbelief with readers. But I keep enough interesting details in there to make the story believable and feel real. And as long as it feels real to people, then I think I can explore the more dangerous and dramatic side of these stories.
I like the danger side to me, which also goes back to your past work. I love the line in the book, "Cross-examination is daylight robbery." I think that's so great. I love that line and it makes me think, Steve, what does cross-examination teach you about human behavior? Are people easier to rob, so to speak? Are they easier to do it than we think, I guess?
Well, it depends. You have to take each witness as you find them. But in terms of that, cross-examination is a real art form. I think it can be taught a little bit, but it is an inherent skill, because it's a psychological war of words. Every word used in that courtroom is a weapon. So you got to know when to use it, how to use it. For an example, one of the lines is, "Lawyers don't ask questions unless they know the answer to that question." What they don't tell you is the lawyer gives you the answer in the question. So there's lots of psychological tricks and wordplay, and to me, I love that. That's what I think sets my novels apart from others, and hopefully keeps it entertaining for the readers.
For sure.
The other thing that's really, really cool is the structure of this, Lindsay, in the fact that the very structure of the novel is a cross-examination. And I'm going to get a little bit technical with our listeners in a way that I think they'll understand. Tell me what it is.
Technical.
Okay. So the idea of the funnel technique, the idea that you can teach somebody the funnel technique of keep on basically closing the door further and further on the witness until they are trapped inside the question that you have asked and
Yes.
the precise wording that you have asked. That's what the book does too, because what the book is doing to your central character is it's beginning to slowly limit his choices while he is simultaneously attempting to do the same thing together. And in some ways, this 4.5-hour format of the audiobook actually is structured as if one kind of snapshot, that you actually have to kind of go back and throw in the exposition in very selective ways because we're only looking at 24 hours. We start right at the moment of maximum crisis, get to the deep breath before the plunge, and then jump back in that old technique of 24 hours earlier, and then we're off to the races. Were you cognizantly aware when you began? You call the novel The Cross. Were you aware that you were attempting to replicate in structure the art of the cross?
No, very honestly, I have to say
It's okay.
But that's okay. I'm glad that it worked out that way. I'm always conscious of moving the story on. I think what happens in crimes, either from police work or from lawyers, is there are long periods of time where very little happens. And then there are short, compressed periods of time where lots of stuff happens and everyone's under pressure. And I tend to try and set my stories in those times of pressure and crisis because that's what I think gives them, real heft and pace and weight. But no, I wasn't aware that I'd structured it that way in terms of reflecting the funnel. But that's very interesting that you spotted that. So I'm going to take credit for that now and say, yes, I intended that all along.
Well done. Well done.
It's funny, Lindsay. Lindsay will often ask me questions, like we're trying to get down to the bottom of something, and Lindsay will often ask me questions, and I'll actually giggle when I read them. I'm like, oh, the answer that Lindsay wants is actually inside the question, and I don't have a lot of room to maneuver, and then I've got to engage in an Irish doublespeak in order to get myself out of it, to buy myself more time before I have a better answer for her.
Always challenging.
And it's always a challenging thing. The other thing is, too, what I have to imagine is deliberate, though, is that you did want to write a short-form piece, correct? I mean, because you mentioned the French Connection, and the whole structure of this is one long chase. I mean, there's a moment where a face explodes, and I'll simply put it that way, it's not to ruin anything. A face explodes, and from that moment, it feels like a propulsion drive at that point. That was part of your design, to write something really short, tight, and terse, to kind of give people kind of a single-sitting freight train. I mean, was deliberate, correct?
That's deliberate, but I have to say that's the way I write all my books. I'm terrified of the reader, either stop pausing the audiobook or putting down the book and saying, "Oh, I'll come back to that later." I write short, punchy chapters. I keep the story moving. I have lots of twists and cliffhangers. And I'm terrified of the reader putting the book down or being bored. So that's kind of the way I write everything, whether it's a longer novel or this shorter piece. I'm very needy for the reader's attention because I'm conscious, if you get an audiobook or if you buy one of my books, you're giving me your time. And I want to make sure that that time is well spent. And you put the book down at the end, or you finish the audiobook and you think, wow, I'm so glad I did that. And I'll have another one, please.
I'm curious, too. We should have a couple minutes left, but I want to talk about New York real quick, because New York in the past few years, and especially post-COVID, has shifted a lot. It's got a bad rap. It's, people say the heart is gone, but it's not. There's still so much beauty in the melting pot and the big expansive world that New York is. So, your book takes readers on a tour of New York that is very frantic and feels very alive. So I'm curious to you, especially since you are not from New York, nor even this country, what part of New York City as a character, what part of New York brings out your best writing, and what part perhaps your worst?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I love the city. I love the park. Central Park is just gorgeous and very really inspiring. And I find the sort of the seedier sides, the darker streets, exciting. That can be, some dive bar where I've been hustling pool in Hell's Kitchen, or it can be a beautiful street on the Upper West Side. I can find something a little suspicious and spooky and dangerous in any part of the city. But that's what I also love. But it's, the whole city is a character, and the pace of that city matches the pace of the books. So it's easy, hopefully, to bring it to life.
For sure.
I can't believe we're out of time.
I know, it's a bummer, but you guys can find out more if you head over to stevecavanaghauthor.com. You can also find more about him on our own website at radionemo.com. The book is available. It's available in audio. You can go listen now. You can, I think we have the download instructions, maybe even on our website.
Actually, yeah, I mean, it's on Audible as well, too. There's a lot of groovy stuff that's happening now. It's by the way, I actually, before we got sent the link, Lindsay, I actually went on Audible and got it. I'm like, oh, darn it.
It's perfect for our listeners, Steve. Real quick before we lose you, that most of our listeners are over-the-road truck drivers. If they can listen to this and realize 4 hours of their drive is checked off, their drive/their work, that's perfect. So I know we'll be sending people your way, and we appreciate you making the time from afar for us.
Thank you.